The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you.
Hello, and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always, I'm by myself again this week, guys, which I guess that's the person I am most always joined always by, me. So it's just me this week, scheduling, blah, 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 you've heard it. So I was thinking about, for these situations where it's tough to schedule around and it ends up being me by myself, what I should do with these times. And there's a few things on our list that are super obscure, like obscure to me even. I found them through searching for stuff for the podcast. Movies I've never seen or even heard of. A lot of them are, weird things that I found on like various streaming sites, especially Tubi. So I thought some of these, they just kind of keep getting bounced down on the list because I don't know anything about them. And, my co-hosts are not particularly interested in them because they don't know anything about them. So I thought maybe that would be a fun thing to just like grab one of those every now and then when I need to do a quick solo episode. So that's what I'm doing this week. Since I had a Hayden last week with Stitchhead, I thought, why not start this plan with this movie I found on Tubi called Puzzlehead. So I knew absolutely nothing about this movie going in, other than that like it was billed as like a modern day Frankensteinian fable. So I went in totally blind, just finished watching it a little bit ago, and it's an interesting watch. I can't say that I loved this movie, but I appreciated what they were doing here, and it's certainly a low budget movie, labor of love thing, and how I feel about those. So yeah, I'm glad that the people who made this movie made it, and there's some interesting stuff to think about. There's some interesting stuff they're doing visually. I think I would say my big complaint about the movie is a complaint that I think a lot of people have about a lot of sci-fi, especially, like the sort of like heyday of like pulp sci-fi, the 70s, 80s era, where a lot of it was about ideas and not really about, and specifically in the like pulp sci-fi, I'm thinking of like novels, novellas and such. A lot of it was very idea focused and not really very rich in like character development or plot even. I think Kurt Vonnegut obviously getting saddled with the title of sci-fi author poked fun at this a lot with his character Kilgore Trout. If you've read much Vonnegut, Kilgore Trout had all these ideas for books, and in Vonnegut's novels, these ideas are just kind of discussed and then thrown away really quickly. And I kind of got that vibe from Puzzlehead. We have the basic story, of a mad scientist creating, in this case, like a sort of artificial intelligent robot automaton kind of, or not automaton. He is, intelligent. But the thing is that he's a copy, a brain scanned copy. So we got Walter the scientist, and we have Puzzlehead, his creation, and Puzzlehead is a brain scanned copy of Walter's brain, but also a perfect physical copy of him. So we have the same actor portraying both Walter and Puzzlehead. And they kind of do that really interestingly in that, like, the early scenes of the film, Walter has a beard and glasses, and Puzzlehead, as like a robot, does not. He does have hair, like, on his head, but he does not have the facial hair, and obviously does not need glasses. So early on, they actually look like distinctly different characters, different actors playing them. The beard does enough that, like, it doesn't look like the same guy. And then that becomes part of the plot as we go. And I will say that aspect was pretty interesting. But I think the thing that really kind of kept me from, like, really engaging with this story the way that I wanted to is both, like, Puzzlehead has, like, a stilted robotic way of speaking. It's very monotone. It's very matter of fact. It's not even as, like, personable as, like, a Mr. Spock or a Data from Star Trek. It's just very flat. And if that was what we were going for with, like, this is the robot guy, this is what he sounds like, but Walter sounds exactly the same. And yes, it's the same actor, but it's like it's an affect. Like, this cannot possibly be what this actor sounds like in real life. And I don't know if it's that he's just stilted as an actor, like, can't embody the character the way he wants to, and it just kind of comes across like this, or if it's a character choice. But it just, it's like a cool and emotionless in a way that, like, I can't really think of anything that is this way. Like, you know, I've heard a lot of people accuse Stanley Kubrick of having a similar kind of vibe with his films. They do not compare to this. I mean, obviously, every single thing that happens in a Kubrick movie is very intentional, and, you know, he's famous for, you know, doing, like, hundreds of takes and all this, like, to get it exactly the way he wanted. Whereas this is a very low-budget film, and I feel like they probably, you know, just shot it, put it in the can, and kept going. Like, I don't think they had the time or money to really spend a lot of, you know, time developing this character or these characters, or, you know, the actors' abilities. In fact, I would, in most cases, wonder if this is, like, you know, the writer, director, and also star kind of thing. But that is not the case. The film's written and directed by someone named James By, and Puzzlehead and Walter are played by Stephen Galeta. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, like, it was a lot of this movie ends up being about emotions and about whether this created man can have emotions. There's a lot of jealousy and bitterness and betrayal and revenge and all of this. But everyone is so measured in the way they talk. There's a bit, like, where someone is quote unquote begging for their lives, and it's just flat monotone. So it's hard to feel the betrayal and the depth of the emotion that the you know, the script is telling us, because the performances are not giving that. So okay, well, I'll go ahead and get into it. We'll go through the plot. The plot here is fairly sparse, but you know, there is this sort of, like, revenge and betrayal sort of plot that is there. So we're kind of set up at the beginning to learn that we're in some sort of near future semi-dystopia. Technology has mostly been outlawed due to several different groups, Luddites and anti-federalists, I believe is what he says, and that the population is decreasing to the point that all of the tech type facilities, all of the, you know, I guess server farms and whatever have been gutted and replaced with fertility clinics. But Walter was able to just steal anything that wasn't nailed down. He's filled his basement with tech, and, you know, he created Puzzlehead, and he starts taking this experimental drug where he can stay up for days at a time so that he can just program and train and teach Puzzlehead, and we get these early sequences feel very much like a positive kind of Frankenstein story. We have Walter teaching Puzzlehead to read, and we see that his vision is very blurry, and then Walter like removing his eyes and replacing them and continuing to like, I mean, we don't think about this often, but like the lenses that our eyes are something that's difficult to reproduce in a technology form, but ultimately he gets there, and we see Puzzlehead reading, we see Puzzlehead and Walter playing chess. Walter comments that some of Puzzlehead's choices are strange, which I really liked, because I think right out of the gate we're being told Puzzlehead is not a computer. He's not an AI. AI and computers, if you play chess against a computer, it's designed to play the most logical move at any given moment. AI is, programmed to give you the answer that seems the most like what you would expect to receive from this question. But Puzzlehead makes choices that seem kind of unorthodox. Contrary to that, Puzzlehead also has been taught to play, I think it's a harpsichord. It's not just like a piano. But Walter, criticizes his playing and says that it is mechanical and that he should play with feeling, and he tries to kind of show him that. So he may think a little bit differently than a computer, but as far as his like body and his movements, he is still very mechanical. He is a created being. So yeah, we have this early point where we're like, the creator is teaching his creation, and it feels like there's some hope and some promise there. But again, everyone is so cold and measured that it's hard to feel a lot of like connection and empathy for either of these two characters. And we have like Puzzlehead is actually the narrator of the film, so he's kind of like telling us what's going on, which having a running sort of voiceover narration kind of gives it like this noirish feeling, which definitely fits the film. It's very like grayscale, and just like there is a noir quality to it in a way, but I don't know. There's also something very like noir feels expansive in a way. Like the night is big and full and rich, and everything in this feels very claustrophobic and small. And in fact, like as we get a scene where Walter goes out, and he's carjacked. His car is stolen, and then he has to like walk home through again, this is a very near future kind of dystopia, so it doesn't look, if you go to the industrial bad part of your nearest city, it wouldn't look that out of the ordinary. A lot of drab concrete, a lot of like chain link fences, people sleeping on the streets, etc. But Walter seems very uncomfortable with all of this, and when he gets home, he tells Puzzlehead that he's been thinking, and it's time that Puzzlehead gets out into the world and experiences the real world. And Puzzlehead seems a little nervous about that as well. He's never been outside the house. And Walter is really pitching this as like, this is the next stage in your development, and I am your master. I say, and you're going to do it. But, I mean, really, it feels like Walter is like, I don't want to go outside anymore. I'm getting increasingly scared of my environment, and I want to stay safe in the house. So I'm going to use this creation that I have to protect me. And so we get some shots of Puzzlehead going out into the world, just walking around. We get, like, POV shots of him that are, like, grainy camera footage, as if, like, this is, the lenses that his eyes have. And things seem to go fine at first, and he comes home, they talk about it, everything seems good. On another trip, later, Puzzlehead is stopped by a kind of a strange guy, and he asks some like weird questions, and Puzzlehead seems kind of confused, and then we see that the guy has pulled a gun. And Puzzlehead is even more confused, he doesn't know what's going on, and so the guy just shoots him. But Puzzlehead is a robot, and this does not seem to particularly harm him, or certainly doesn't kill him. So Puzzlehead walks home, and we get this bit where, like, right when he gets home, his arm starts, like, flapping around all crazy. It seems like whatever happened with the bullet has caused some sort of, like, servo in his arm to go haywire. And so we have, Walter bringing him in, doing repairs. They talk about why did this happen, and Walter tries to explain the idea of robbery, and the idea of death. And Puzzlehead has a lot of trouble understanding what death would feel like. And Walter realizes he doesn't really understand what being turned off would feel like, and maybe it's the same, maybe it's not. There's no way for them to understand each other's perspectives on this. And then we have, like, a little later, Walter is, like, testing bulletproofing. He's, like, firing a gun at targets, presumably to, like, strengthen Puzzlehead. He also creates recorders to implant in Puzzlehead's eyes, so that he can see what happens to Puzzlehead out in the world a little better. Puzzlehead's narration there says something like, "If I had known the consequences of this, I would have never opened my eyes again." And we see that, some time has passed. Puzzlehead is being sent to the grocery every week, and he realizes that this place feels very familiar to him, and he has strange feelings about it, and this would be because of Walter's brain being scanned and copied for Puzzlehead. He has some sort of hazy memories that were Walter's about this grocery. He kind of, like, bumps into this girl who runs the shop. It's like a little, like, bodega deli type of shop. And they kind of have this awkward interaction, but both of them seem, like, a little intrigued with each other. And then we see, like, later, Walter watching the playback from Puzzlehead's cameras, and he also seems to have this feeling of, like, being sort of drawn to this girl. We'll eventually get her name as Julia, but it's, like, a while before we find that out. After watching the playback, we have Walter choosing to go to the grocery. After kind of not going outside for a while, he decides, he's intrigued. He wants to go see Julia. But when he gets there, somebody comes in, like, right behind him, this sort of, like, central casting Russian gangster thug kind of guy. And it seems to be, like, some sort of shakedown. He, like, kind of intimidates Julia a little bit. She gives him, like, a paper sack with something in it, presumably money or something that she's giving him for, it's like a protection racket kind of thing. But additionally, he kind of, like, pushes her up against a wall and sort of forcibly kisses her, and she's not into it. So yeah, this guy's definitely a bad guy, who she is afraid of, and who Walter's afraid of. He is there, and he just kind of, like, ducks behind some racks of something and watches all this play out, but does not get involved, does not try to help Julia in any way. So, we're getting kind of the measure of Walter here. He's certainly cowardly. And then I think while he's away, we go back to Puzzlehead, who's home and is, like, all alone for the first time. Like, he's just been in the house with Walter, except for, like, when, one or the other of them is out for things. And he starts to feel lonely and kind of melancholy, and these are new feelings that he doesn't really understand, and he wants to. So he starts going through Walter's notebooks, the journals of his creation, and we get probably the weirdest scene in this movie. Once Walter leaves the store, he's probably feeling some amount of, like, guilt, and continuing to feel fear or whatever. He goes and he sits on a bench in the park, and he looks over, and there's a couple making out. And, like, the way they're kind of faced, we got, like, the back of the guy's head, and just, like, part of the girl's face as she's, like, kind of angled. And so, but her eye is open, and she is just watching Walter while she's making out with this guy. And then when they stop, the guy turns around, and it's Walter. It's not real. I mean, it looks just like Walter. I don't know what this is supposed to tell us, like why Walter is seeing this. It's certainly interesting in that, like, I'm sure that this actor is the same actor again, and that, Walter and Puzzlehead are the same actor. And again, like I think that's the thing that I found most interesting about this is like all the scenes with Walter and Puzzlehead. There are scenes with them like in the room together talking and stuff, and there's a lot of cutting back and forth to show them and everything. But the beard and the no beard and everything, they had to have like planned this out very carefully and used body doubles and stuff to like get all of this to like, because I mean I'm pretty sure it's a real beard. We'll get a scene in a little bit where Walter shaves, and yeah, I think it was a real beard. So yeah, interesting that they were able to pull all this off. Like it's a technical achievement for sure, like especially for a low budget film. But so we do have, after Walter sees this, he goes home, he catches Puzzlehead looking through his work notes, and he's angry about this. But again, it's very flat and monotone, and he's just like, why are you doing this? Why are you looking at my notes? Leave this room and don't come back in here. This isn't for you. And Puzzlehead walks out, and we just have like more scenes of him, of Puzzlehead cleaning. That seems to be the main thing he does in the house, is just clean. But I think the frightening instance with at the store, Walter ends up sending Puzzlehead back to the store, even though he seems like he has this interest in kind of rekindling or connecting or something with Julia. And when Puzzlehead's at the shop, things are even worse. An armed robber appears, a different guy, and he pulls a gun on Julia, and Puzzlehead just comes and fights the guy. I think he might get shot in the process, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt him. And he, gets the gun away, and the guy runs out, and Julia is very impressed. I don't know if she even clocked Walter when he was in the store previously, but here she certainly realizes that she was in a very dangerous situation and this guy saved her. So she invites him up to her room. They, sit on the couch, and she asks if he wants anything to drink, and he says, no, do you? Because he's used to serving. He doesn't even have any idea about like why he would want to drink. He just knows he's there to provide the drinks. And that kind of, we just cut away from that at that point. So like we don't really get what's going on with them, except that Puzzlehead does not arrive home until the next morning, and Walter is furious. Still very flat and monotone, but he's asleep in the hallway at the front of the house, and is like, where have you been all night? Puzzlehead just says, out. And Walter's like, I don't like this new rebellious streak in you. Where have you been? What have you been doing? And Puzzlehead will not say. So he turns Puzzlehead off and, again, looks at the camera recordings and watches the playback and sees that Puzzlehead saved Julia's life in this robbery, and that she then invited him back to her room. So presumably they had sex. It's we don't see it, but like, that seems to be what we're led to believe here. And he's obviously, Walter is not happy about this. So he drags the still powered off Puzzlehead, puts him down in the lab, goes back upstairs, shaves his beard, cuts his hair, and now we see that this is the same actor. And of course he still has the glasses. He has like little like John Lennon, Harry Potter round kind of framed glasses, but other than that, exactly the same. And we have like later on, Puzzlehead wakes up and there's like a speaker next to his head, with Walter's voice coming through it, presumably a recording or just him talking through an intercom. Basically Walter saying, here's a list of chores. Do these things while I'm out. I'm going to be gone all day, and I want all these things done before I get back. And when Walter does get home later, Puzzlehead has finished, and he comes to check on Walter, and Walter's like, that'll do. You can head to bed, or go back to your room, basically. And as Puzzlehead turns around to go, Walter pulls a controller out of his pocket and hits it, and Puzzlehead goes unconscious and collapses. So he has now created a remote control power switch instead of having to like hit him on the back of the neck. And then we get voiceover from Puzzlehead that like he suddenly started experiencing blackouts. He will lose chunks of time and suddenly be somewhere else where he doesn't remember how he got there, and wonders, am I being shut off remotely? And we see, meanwhile, that Walter has now, ingratiated himself with Julia, who thinks that this is the man that saved her from the robbery, and he's spending time in her apartment. While he's gone, Puzzlehead is able to, find more of Walter's journals and notes and confirm that Walter is turning him off remotely. And he also is able to create some sort of battery backup device that he installs in himself. He surgically cuts his stomach open and messes with the wires and everything. And so now he has a backup so that whenever he's turned off, it will immediately boot him back up, and he can pretend to be off until Walter leaves, and then can move around freely. And very quickly he's able to figure out what Walter's up to, that he's turning him off and leaving and, going somewhere for days at a time, it seems like. And he says, Walter pretended that he was my father, but he was only my maker. So he follows Walter and, of course, finds that he is, spending time with Julia. And then we see that Walter invites Julia back to his place. So we have Puzzlehead kind of having to surreptitiously get home before Walter does, and hide. And we have, while they're kind of spending time together in the house, Puzzlehead says that seeing Julia in the house, and seeing Walter trying to seduce her, that this sparks memories in him, and these are Walter's memories of him. He's clearly had an interest in Julia since long before Puzzlehead existed, and Puzzlehead watches all of this hidden in a closet in this very voyeuristic way, and we get a scene where Walter seems it's, again, because everything in this movie is just so even-keeled and there's no high emotion ever. This scene was kind of hard to read. It didn't really, it is only confirmed sort of in the aftermath, but Walter sort of forces himself on Julia. This scene, it's a full-on sexual assault, rape or something, but Julia is basically just please, there's no, she's not really of course, anything other than an enthusiastic yes is a no. That's obvious. That's important to say here, but in this scene, Julia is not really telegraphing that she is opposed to what's happening. Right away I read into it that this doesn't seem right, and sure enough, the next thing we see is after Walter falls asleep, Julia gets up, goes and gets in the bath, and slits her wrists. So, I think that if there was any question, that confirms it, that, what happened to her was incredibly upsetting, and she, is suffering because of this. Meanwhile, we have Puzzlehead, who after the assault went back down to the lab. But we get the voiceover of him sort of processing this, realizing that Walter has tricked Julia into thinking that these two men that she's interacted with are the same person, and that Walter is the person who saved her and that slept with her immediately following the robbery. And he's I wanted to go explain things to her, fix things. I wanted to get her away from Walter. But when he goes upstairs, he finds she's not in the bed. He goes into the bathroom and he finds her there, in a tub that's dark. Obviously she's lost a lot of blood. And at first he doesn't seem like he understands. He's just talking to her, even though she's clearly unconscious. But eventually he is please don't die. And I think maybe he accepts that she has died and is upset to the point that life no longer matters to him. I'm not, or maybe he's trying to get it. I don't know. So once he, after he says please don't die, he gets up from next to her and he walks over to the sink and he just starts smashing his head into the sink until his head falls off. And all of this noise, of course, wakes up Walter in the next room, who, goes into the bathroom and finds, Julia seemingly dead and Puzzlehead with the puzzle piece of his head having been removed. And then we get some quick scenes of Walter sewing Julia's wrists, bandaging her up, putting her into bed, and reassembling Puzzlehead. And we also get several scenes of him sitting at her bedside and quote-unquote begging her for forgiveness, but again, cold, emotionless, just flat. Once Puzzlehead has been reassembled, we get more scenes of him walking around the neighborhood, and in this voiceover he says that this part of my life is kind of hard to recall and to describe to you. Walter had done something to me. He changed my brain. I was an automaton. I no longer had choice. I was basically a docile robot lobotomized. And we see him at Julia's shop organizing the shelves. But very, as I've been kind of hammering, everything is very flat and robotic anyway. But now his movements even feel mechanical. He does not have even a hint of human, locomotion. And we go back to the house where we find out that Julia is alive. Walter did save her in time. And it seems like some amount of time has passed. They're she's out of bed. She's, up and about and willing to talk to Walter. She's seems to be still recovering from her injuries, but she's not I want nothing to do with my rapist or anything like that. Maybe she just doesn't feel like she's safe, and this is the way that she can stay safe until she's recovered enough to leave. But she seems ill, and Walter asks her, and she says she believes that it may be morning sickness. Which is interesting because at the beginning of the film we had the indication that fertility clinics are a big thing in this society because presumably pregnancy is hard to come by. So this would be a really complicated situation to be in. We run into this often in not about women's rights and abortion and stuff now in our quote supposedly not yet dystopian society, where does a woman have the right to abort a fetus created out of rape, and this complicates it further in that is our population declining? Is this a dire need for the future of humanity for this baby to be born? Obviously, I still feel that Julia should be autonomous and allowed to do whatever she wants here. And it doesn't seem like she has any sort of indication of wanting to terminate this or anything. But it certainly raises a lot of questions. And Walter, he's quick to be oh, I did not expect this. But I'll take care of you. I'll do whatever you need. I'm here for you. And I found that also kind of interesting. I think the common sort of through line with Victor Frankenstein characters is that they're so focused on the act of creation, the thing that creates this act, that they're not concerned about the results. Frankenstein always seems to be sort of surprised that suddenly he's stuck with this sentient being that he has to teach and care for and, interact with. And so I think it's kind of like a funny sort of, reference to that, in that, like, he's like, well, I had sex with you, but I was not expecting that you would be pregnant, and now that you are, I don't know what to do about that. Again, I wanted to do the thing that creates the life, but then dealing with the life? No, that couldn't be me. So, yeah, it's kind of funny. And then we have just, like, Julia and Walter in the house, just kind of like existing. We don't really see much of Puzzlehead. But then Julia does see a silhouetted figure dropping off some like sacks of groceries at the door and then vanishing, and she doesn't get a good look at who it is, and she asks Walter, like, do you have like a delivery boy? Like, who is that guy? And Walter's like, yeah, it's just a delivery guy. I hired him. Neither one of us can get out right now, so we just need somebody to be able to bring us food. And I'm also paying him. He's taking care of the shop while you're, recovering. I didn't want your store to go into disrepair. And he's doing a great job. He's really turning things around. The shop is really thriving in your absence, actually. So you have nothing to worry about. Just take your time, heal up here, and he'll take care of everything out there in the world. And she keeps asking questions, and Walter's like, I don't like this new curiosity you've got going on. I don't like it. And she apologizes, kind of backs down. I think, again, Julia is trying to figure out what's going on around her, trying to keep herself safe, and sometimes that means, like, trying to find out information, but also backing off when you need to, because you don't want Walter upset. She does bring up in this conversation that there's like a locked door, and he says, oh, that goes down to the basement. It just stays locked all the time. I haven't been down there in years. I'm sure it's just dangerous. Just don't go down there. But then one evening, Julia sees Walter using a key and going into the basement. So she like kind of hides, and just like we see, like, later on, he's asleep in bed. She gets out of bed, digs through his pockets, finds that key, and goes and lets herself into the basement to see what's going on. And, of course, she finds this sort of, like, dilapidated science lab, but then she hears someone coming from a different direction, and she, like, ducks behind a table, and we have Puzzlehead entering through some sort of, like, outside cellar door or something. And she gets enough of a look at him that this looks like Walter. What's going on? And he, like, lays down on a slab and seems to just, like, go to sleep and, like, is charging. So, I think she, like, leaves there and goes upstairs and sees that, Walter is still in bed asleep. So we've got these two guys that seem to be the same guy, but are different in some way. So, we see a scene of her drugging a cup of tea. She, like, takes a pill capsule and opens it and pours the powder in, drugs Walter, and then she leaves the house and goes to the shop where Puzzlehead is working very efficiently, running the place. And she's like, come with me. And so they go back up to her apartment, and she says, do you remember me? And he says, I don't. And she says, what do you remember? What's the last thing you remember? And he seems a little confused. He's like, well, I was a child and I was learning. My father taught me, and he played games with me, and he was proud of me and impressed with my development. And then we just see, like, later, she's down in the lab with Puzzlehead. She has the back of his head open, and he's describing, a series of wires connected to a circuit board in such a place, and he instructs her to clip the 3 wires in a specific order. So he's performing his own brain surgery through her hands. And, this is clearly, like, the lobotomy that Walter did is being undone. So then we see that night, Walter comes down to the lab and sees Puzzlehead there working at a computer, and Puzzlehead turns around and says, oh, hi, Puzzlehead, what are you doing down here? And Walter's like, no, I'm Walter, you're Puzzlehead. And he's like, no, I think you're confused. I'm Walter, you're Puzzlehead. I can show you. And he goes and he picks up a remote control. Puzzlehead does, and he holds it out towards Walter and like presses a button. And it works because Julia has snuck up behind Walter and hits him on the back of the head, and he collapses. So he is turned off. And then we have once Walter is sort of like captive, Puzzlehead is free again. He begins to read and study and learn, and like he has exponential growth again. But he has this like nagging fear that his own mind is sort of limited by Walter's mind. It's a copy. So he can never be smarter than Walter. And not only that, but the darkness that Walter is carrying is also in Puzzlehead. And Puzzlehead's not comfortable with that. He's worried about like, what is that gonna mean? What am I gonna do? And then we just have like later, Julia and Puzzlehead are like spending time in the apartment, and she says, "What will become of us? This is so complicated." Puzzlehead seems confused. What's complicated? Everything's fine now. And she says, "If only you were human." And he says, "What does that have to do with anything? I'm better than a human. Are you not happy?" And she says, "Yes." "Then stop worrying." And again, she does not seem happy. But no one seems happy in this film at any moment. No one seems particularly mad or sad or anything. But certainly they don't seem happy. And he indicates that she says, "What are you doing down in the basement? It seems like you're working on something new." And he won't say. And then we see a little later, she is digging through his notebooks when he's not around. So it's sort of like an echo of Puzzlehead doing the same thing with Walter. And sure enough, Puzzlehead seems to be trying to become a creator of himself. And that it seems like he's working on designing like a robotic woman. Which I was like, oh, this is going to be a really interesting direction we're going to go. Is there going to be this like... we had the one love triangle, now we have a new love triangle. What's that going to mean? Does Julia even want Puzzlehead now that she knows the truth? But we don't really get anything else about this robot woman. Like, she just does not amount to anything. We like, the next scene is just Puzzlehead and Julia eating dinner, and she says, she can't eat, she's worried, the baby's gonna be soon, but also, what are we gonna do about Walter? We can't keep him locked away forever. And Puzzlehead assures her that when the time comes with the baby, he's got everything under control, and he'll take care of Walter. Don't worry about Walter, he'll figure something out. So we have a little later, he's like, I'll be back, I'm gonna run to the store. And she's like, oh, I'll come with you. And he's like, no, you need to stay home, you need your rest. The baby, it's important, take care of yourself. Which just feels like an excuse. It doesn't feel like he's actually concerned for her health so much as that he wants to be alone. And while he's gone, she goes downstairs and talks to Walter through the cell door. And this is the part where like the egregiousness of like the flat monotone like hits its peak. Walter is talking through the door. We don't even see him, and he's just like, please let me out. I'm starving. I'm dying. Please just let me out. There's no desperation. There's no fear. There's no agony in his voice at all. And she's like, why should I let you out? You lied to me. You tricked me. And he says, I wish that I could explain. I was lost. I've been lost for so long, and you were my purpose. I wanted you. I wanted to be with you, and I didn't think about the consequences. I would have done anything in my power to be with you, and that wasn't fair to you. But if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll never lie to you again. And she says she does forgive him, which, again, she's not just forgiving him for lying to her and tricking her about his identity, which in and of itself is assault. Like, convincing someone that you are someone that you're not, and using that to seduce them, you are already coercing them. You are already they cannot consent if they don't know who and what they're consenting to. But so she's forgiving him for that, and she's also forgiving him for the actual physical assault. So that's a lot. And she says that, like, she'll help him. She's got to find the keys and figure something out, but she does forgive him, and they're going to be okay. And then we see that Puzzlehead is upstairs watching this whole conversation occur. He's watching through, like, closed-circuit TV. So when she comes up the stairs, she's met by Puzzlehead right at the top of the stairs, and he's like, "What were you doing downstairs?" And she's like, "Oh, nothing. I was just down, And we had a scene earlier where Puzzlehead was in a similar situation, and was able to quickly be like, "Oh yeah, I was looking for laundry detergent, and we don't have any, so we need to order some." But here, Julia, one, is not as quick on her feet as Puzzlehead, but also it doesn't matter what she says because Puzzlehead saw what happened. So he says, I'm here to protect you from your own human frailties. And he slaps her, like knocks her unconscious, and then like he just picks her up. And the next thing we see is Puzzlehead in the backyard digging a deep hole. So it seems almost like he's going to be disposing of Julia. But while he's digging, we get more voiceover, and that he's still, again, like frustrated by the limitations of Walter's memories. And the only thing he can think to do is he needs to find a completely clean slate, a neural net that's untouched by memory and thought and ideas, a tabula rasa. He pronounced it as tabula rasa. I've never heard it pronounced that way. Maybe that's an acceptable alternate pronunciation, but I was struck by how strange that sounded. And then the next thing we see is like Julia is asleep, from having been, knocked out. And there's Walter. He's grown his beard back as he's been trapped in the basement. And he's like, I was able to escape. I broke out of the cell, and I've got a plan. I can defeat Puzzlehead, and we'll be safe. And she agrees. And he's like, okay, you stay here. I'm going to go deal with this, and then we'll get you to the hospital, and everything's going to be okay. And then we see that it's actually Puzzlehead. He has, in some way, gotten a beard. I don't know if he is able to control that and grew it, or if this is a false beard he's put on to trick Julia. But either way, it worked. This is Puzzlehead. He goes downstairs to the cell where Walter is still very much captive, and he seems to kill Walter, like knocks him unconscious, and drags him out back where he has dug this hole, and he throws him in the hole and starts to put dirt down over top of him. But he stopped because he hears Julia crying in pain in the house. She has gone into labor. So he runs inside. We get this scene where, like an ambulance has arrived. He's getting her into the ambulance, and he's like, "Don't worry, Julia. I'll follow you. I'll be there soon." Again, not, totally disinterested. And so as soon as she leaves in the ambulance, he goes back out back to finish burying Walter. But Walter's gone. He was not dead. He was only unconscious. And he suddenly pops out behind Puzzlehead, and we have a whole big fight between the two of them. They kind of stumble through the house. They knock some things over. But, this is a fight scene that is sort of believable in that, it's not an elaborate movie magic fight scene. No one's doing flips. No one knows karate, but it does also feel a little stilted because they're probably using a real house that they don't want to smash a bunch of shit in. But yeah, so they do have this whole elaborate fight, and at a few points, Walter is able to hit Puzzlehead on the back of the neck, turning him off. but he still does have that battery pack, and so he keeps coming back online pretty much immediately. They eventually get up to the attic, and they're fighting up there, and we get a great bit where in the fight, Walter is wearing glasses, but they both now have the beard. They both look identical other than the glasses. Walter's glasses get knocked off. They continue to fight and scuffle around, and in the fight, one of them gets knocked out of a window and falls to their death. The other one bends down, picks the glasses up off the floor, and puts them on. It is unclear who. We don't know who has survived this fight. And then we have a little later, that survivor, whoever they are, arrives at the hospital to visit Julia, and she says, "Oh, thank God it's you," seeing, a man with a beard and glasses. And of course, she doesn't know any of the stuff about, that this was a fake Walter that talked to her or whatever. So everything to her mind is that this is the Walter that came to me and said he had escaped. And he says, "Don't worry, we're safe now." And he asks if he could hold the baby. He picks up the baby, and then we have a voiceover again from the narrator, Puzzlehead, who says, "I was able to scan the baby's brain and use the information from that clear brain to begin again. I was able to learn what it felt like to be new and sort of process my memories, my Walter memories, and sort of partition them and visit them as needed, but I can also begin my own life and be free, and perhaps to feel truly what it feels like to be human, to have hope and to have a future." And we get like a close-up of his eye and see that it is, it does like a camera iris kind of thing. Of course the voiceover spelled it out, but like absolutely 100%, Walter is dead. Puzzlehead has killed him and fully taken over his identity. Presumably this will cause trouble down the line, because I can't imagine that Puzzlehead will age. But for the moment, Puzzlehead and Julia and the young baby are going to be a happy family unit, or as happy as anybody in this movie can manage. So yeah, that's how we end with this sort of, we have this sort of thriller love triangle with a Frankenstein twist that ends with it's hard to say who's the bad guy in this, right? Like neither Walter nor Puzzlehead is particularly good by the end of it. Yeah, so it's, I guess in that way that may be the most Frankenstein-y thing about it, in that like early on we have nothing but sympathy for Puzzlehead. We see Walter as sort of this tyrant who has created this thing and then does not know what to do with it and does not know how to treat it. And it feels pretty justifiable that Puzzlehead might want to take revenge on Walter and take control of his own life. But then, he begins to sort of control and manipulate Julia similarly to how Walter does. And, I think that it's interesting that, like, unlike Frankenstein, where we have a scientist who creates a body out of corpse parts, and we don't really know where the intelligence, where the soul comes from. The brain, maybe not, depending on the adaptation. But it's certainly nothing to do with Frankenstein. It's not anything having to do with his personality in any way. Maybe back in, we have like the Edison Frankenstein, where we get like the sort of mirror effect that's sort of hinting at that, like, this creation and the creator are the same in some way, or that they're two sides of the same coin. But here it's like beyond that. Like it's the same side of the same coin, and like I think Puzzlehead is destined to be as twisted and fucked up, and like cowardly and cold as Walter, because he's a perfect scanned copy of Walter. And from that moment, that divergence where the copy takes place, Puzzlehead's building his own new memories and trying to become his own person, But at the end of the day, so much of what we've experienced in our lives, so much of our past shapes us and is sort of inescapable. You can run from your dark past. You can, improve yourself. You can, there's always time to change and be better. And maybe that's what Puzzlehead thinks he's accomplishing here at the end by scanning the baby. Maybe he can free himself from the darkness that was inside of Walter. And he can shape himself into the kind of person that he wants to be. And that maybe that Julia wants him to be. Maybe they will be happy. And I don't know. We're left with a long future ahead of us that could go in many different places. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this movie, it's confounding in that, like, it has a lot of interesting stuff to chew on. I mean, I think this came out in like 2004 or something. And I mean, it certainly has some interesting things to say about AI. Like, even now it's got stuff going on that's worth talking about. But the execution is so frustrating at points that, like, I think a lot of people are going to have trouble engaging with this movie. It's just not quite compelling enough to... I mean, we talk about it here a lot, that, like, I think genre film is a great place to talk about big ideas in a way that is sort of safe and, like, protected behind this, like, barrier of genre tropes and trappings. I think you can get away with a lot more stuff in genre film than you can in, an Oscar-worthy, prestige drama. And I think that's certainly what's going on here. I think that we're trying to say something about what happens when we create something that can resent us. What happens when we are saddled with a bad past that we want to free ourselves from. I think there's a couple different things going on here. What happens when somebody lies to you and manipulates you and controls you and makes you do things that you wouldn't otherwise do? I think both Julia and Puzzlehead experience this through Walter. So yeah, there's a lot there. It's just, it's a little too flat. The thing that I would say that it most resembles to me is, like, some of the sort of weird Godard films, if you're into art house cinema. But I don't know. I think Godard is playing with that kind of thing, playing with people's intonations and their presentation intentionally in a way that I don't think this film is. Because if it was just Walter and Puzzlehead who were like this, and we were saying something about that they were the same, or copies of one another, but the fact that Julia is also this way does not sort of speak to that. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's just a little bit missing here. And I think that this film certainly is worth a watch. There are things that I found on Tubi that we won't be talking about that, are not worth a watch. But I think there is something here. There's some stuff to chew on, to think about. But I just wish that there was, like, a little bit more. As far as I can tell, James By wrote, directed, and produced Puzzlehead in 2005 and has not done anything since then. Which is a shame. I think this is the kind of thing that, like, when we watched Frankenstein Created Bikers a couple weeks ago, both Hayden and I were like, we're not really interested in seeing anything that these creators did before this, but if they make something after this, I would give it a chance. I would try it out and see how they've developed as creators. And I think I feel similarly with this. Like, I mean, this seems to be his only thing. I don't even see any shorts. Like, I think this is it. If he made something else, I would check it out. I would be interested to see what he's done, you know, how he's grown as an artist in the past 10 years. But yeah, this as in and of itself, it just, I wanted a little more from it. You know, but for somebody's first attempt at writing, directing, and producing a film on their own, it's you know, it's not bad. It's got stuff going on. It's doing something, and I will never fault people for, you know, trying to tell a story, trying to tell the world what they're concerned about and thinking about, and, you know, mulling over in their minds when they're, you know, trying to fall asleep at night. Yeah, that's kind of the sense that I got from this. This isn't like, you know, hopefully they all had fun on set. You know, often we talk about like, oh yeah, you can just see in this, like, you know, really low budget B movie that's kind of wacky and ridiculous. Everybody must have been having a great time on set, and that's beautiful. I hope this doesn't feel fun. It's not a fun movie, but I hope the creators enjoyed themselves making this. I hope the cast and crew are proud of their work. I hope they're sharing it with people still. I think this is something certainly to be proud of. I just, you know, personally wanted a little more out of it, but, you know, it's not a bad film. It's just lacking a little something. But with that being said, like I said, it's, you know, it's like an hour and 20 minutes. It's on Tubi. It's very easy to see. So if this interested you, if you want to kind of like dive into Puzzlehead's world and see this sort of like grim near future, it's definitely worth your time. So I think that is it for me for this week. Thank you all for your support. You know, as are continuing to sort of figure out how these schedules are going to work. I don't think there's going to be a lot of just me solo, but I do think this will kind of be a fun way to do these occasional, very rare solo episodes with a reason. So I've got a couple other Tubi movies that I've set aside that I just don't know much about, and we'll go into them blind together when the time comes. But, you know, for now, I think, you know, next week, I believe we'll have Eric back. I think we're going to be talking about Project Metal Beast, which is a movie he has been begging us to do for a long time. It's been on the list. And, you know, we did our Del Toro movie together, and I was like, well, Eric's back. It's time to finally let him talk about Project Metal Beast, the perfect mashup of Frankenstein stuff and werewolf stuff, which, as we all know, is Eric's sort of like special passion. So hopefully we'll have Eric back next week to talk about that. In the meantime, you know, you can find us on all the socials at The Frankencast. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. We're also on YouTube. And of course, you can find us over at patreon.com/thefrankencast, where there's all kinds of odds and ends. There's plenty more solo episodes with me. There's episodes with Hayden, Eric, all kinds of off the beaten path stuff. So we'd love to have you over there. There's lots of fun stuff, and we would appreciate the support. So definitely check that out if you can. And as always, to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.